While it would have been great for the New York Mets to complete the four-game series sweep against the Washington Nationals, there's far more positives than negatives to take out of their first series of the season. Of course, they got the victory, but they also saw some awesome pitching performances down the stretch of that series with Chris Bassitt and Carlos Carrasco really delivering for this team. I'll talk about that on today's show. I will discuss some maybe questionable managerial decisions that led to that final loss on Sunday. But overall, it was a good start to the season for the Mets. And now things get really interesting as we are about to preview this upcoming series against the Philadelphia Phillies, a real test for this 2022 Mets team. We will cover all of that on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, there were far more positives than negatives to take from this weekend series. The Mets went 3 of 4, of course. You saw Chris Bassitt dealing on Saturday night. Carlos Carrasco looked great on Sunday. Pete Alonso hit the big grand slam to get that victory on Saturday. And we'll talk about the pitching performances of Bassitt and Carrasco in the next segment. But this is a series that felt like the Mets should have swept it. And it felt like at the end of that game, they let one slip through their fingers. Before we nitpick Buck Showalter, let's get this out of the way. You got to score more than 2 runs against this Nationals team. And that is the biggest reason why they lost in this game. It's not about that 8th inning that got away from the Mets. It's about the team should have scored a little bit more runs. And it's hard to execute and do that for 4 straight games. There's a reason why the Mets have never started a season sweeping a 4-game series. It's just very difficult to do. And overall, I don't want to steer too negative here because this Mets team saw so much that went good for them or went well for them in this series. Mark Canha went 7 for 10 with 3 walks. Jeff McNeil looked like himself. Robinson Cano maybe didn't have the best game on Sunday, but he had his moments before that. Pete Alonso with the grand slam on Saturday. He had his moments. Lindor homered on Sunday, stole a base. He had some positive moments. Starling Marte looked really good as well. The bullpen as a whole had a strong series. So I really am hesitant to open up a Monday show after a weekend when the Mets won the series and start to talk about negatives and start to nitpick Buck Showalter. But that's the conversation right now after the way that game went. It's just natural. And this happens all the time. I have been doing shows for years now where we nitpick Mickey Callaway, Luis Rojas. That's how baseball works. And the manager is always the first to be blamed. And in this instance, Buck Showalter made multiple decisions I disagree with. It's just the bottom line. But he's got to manage the team his way. And so we'll get to that. I just want to go through what everyone's talking about, the mistakes that were made, so to speak. And the one that I think is the most inexcusable came in the top of the 7th inning. The Mets are winning 2-1 in this game on Sunday after Carrasco, had a great performance. You get to this point, top 7. Jeff McNeil leads it off with a walk. Tomas Nido is trying to bunt him over, but just lays down the perfect bunt that allows him to get on base as well. So you're sitting there, runners at first and second, nobody out, in desperate need of insurance runs. Brandon Nimmo ends up striking out after Sean Doolittle comes in to face him, left-on-left matchup. Then you have Francisco Lindor, who flies out. So now you're at this point where Robinson Cano, who's batting 3rd in this game, steps into the box. Left-on-left matchup. For his career against Sean Doolittle, it's not like he hasn't faced this guy. 4 for 25 with 8 strikeouts. Not a good matchup. It's now an American League game in the National League, which Buck Showalter is very familiar with. You have a DH. there's no reason to be conservative with your bench. If there's a matchup you can exploit, you have to go to it. And JD Davis is sitting on your bench for matchups just like this. This is the one decision that I don't think there's an excuse for. When we get to the pitching decisions, I can come around to Buck Showalter's line of thinking. But for this one, makes zero sense. And what happens? Cano strikes out swinging through 3 straight pitches. Just had no chance. No chance left on left facing that fastball. And I know that I have put myself as a Cano advocate. I think the latest review we have on the podcast is someone saying that this is an absolutely great show, but what's with the love affair with Robinson Cano? I don't want my opinion on Robinson Cano to be misconstrued. I am somewhere in the middle. I am pushing back on the notion that the Mets should have just cut Cano. That has been my take, that Robinson Cano can be a valuable player for this team, that you want Cano on this roster because if someone comes down with an injury, Robinson Cano can fill in at second base, at first base, or even at third base in a pinch. He can be your DH. That is what I've said about Robinson Cano. But if you really listen to my takes, I've never said I want Robinson Cano in the lineup every single day. I've also said that Dominic Smith, from the way he looked in spring training, and after we learned about the injuries he dealt with last year, I still think Dom should be this team's primary DH over Cano. I think they have to mix at bats, and Buck Showalter did a great job of that. Everyone got involved in this series. Everyone. And that is part of his genius as a manager, is keeping everyone engaged. And he's doing so many things when it comes to the mindset of a ball club and building a winner that I think outweighs any individual decision. Where I'm still very high on everything that Buck Showalter has done for this Mets team, one decision is not going to change that for me. But in that instance, JD Davis should have been hitting. There's no doubt about that. So with that said, the Mets don't score a run there, and then you get to the 8th inning. Now, Chasen Shreve had come into the game in the 6th inning to get Juan Soto out. He then stayed on for the 7th, pitched a scoreless 7th. Looked very good. The 8th inning, they put him back out there. I saw some Mets fans who were questioning that decision because it's uncommon for a reliever in today's game to have multiple up downs, to go out and pitch in 3 different innings. Chasen Shreve, though, can be a long man. We saw him do that for the Mets in 2020. So that decision to me was totally fine. They had a lefty leading off that inning in Yadiel Hernandez. I get it. Now, you could also say that maybe they should have gone straight to Trevor Williams. And if that's your opinion, I don't disagree with you in that as well. I'm just indifferent on that one. I don't think that was one to crush Buck over. I do think that at times pitchers pitch better with a clean inning. So maybe bringing Trevor Williams in to start things off could have been better, a fresh arm, but whatever. Shreve comes in, first pitch, leaves the slider over the heart of the plate a little bit. Hernandez rips it into the outfield, base hit to lead things off. Then they go get Trevor Williams. Now, here's the big thing. Coming into the game, Buck Showalter tipped his hand. He said they're going to go to Shreve and Williams because they haven't pitched yet. That's what he said. So, true to his word, he goes to Trevor Williams in that spot. Trevor Williams comes in, and he ends up giving up a base hit right away to Maikel Franco, so that puts runners at the corners. Then you have a bunt to try to get in a run. They had already subbed in D. Strange Gordon, so he's at third base, a speedster. A bunt goes to Pete on the squeeze play. He tries to make the play at the plate by underhanding the throw, and D slides in safely. Now, Pete should have probably thrown it, not flipped it. But as Buck Showalter said after the game, it's freezing cold. It's really difficult to make plays out there. It would have been a great play if he had made it. The mistake he made was on the following play where Trevor Williams gets a double play ball, potentially, although Cesar Hernandez is fast, so maybe they couldn't have doubled him off at first, but at least they could have got the force out at second, and Pete makes a bad throw to Lindor. He can't recover enough to get a force out. Everyone's safe. Now you have the bases loaded, Trevor Williams on the mound, Juan Soto up. A disaster. Trevor Williams, to Buck Showalter's credit for pitching him, does execute in that spot, gets a chopper right back to Pete. Pete at that point actually makes a good play, getting the runner out at the plate. And suddenly there's 2 outs. And you think that, I think I also missed in there. I did miss in there. If you didn't watch the game, there was also a bunt that Victor Robles had after the squeeze play that was lined right back into Trevor Williams' glove. So that's how they got the first out of the inning. Then that's the second out at the plate. So now you still have bases loaded, but Nelson Cruz is up. And Nelson Cruz, as a veteran hitter, snakes one through the hole, just out of the reach of Francisco Lindor. The Nationals scored 2 runs, and that was the ball game. 4-2 Nationals win. After the game, Buck Showalter said that the guys pitched well, which to his credit, if you really look at it, it really wasn't the pitcher's fault. It was some execution behind him and just some bad luck that ultimately cost the Mets there. If Pete is able to make that play at the plate or even is able to make that double play ball, the Mets maybe get out of that inning with the tie game, and who knows, maybe they're able to take a lead late and win it. Weren't able to accomplish that. But what Buck Showalter said is he wasn't going to force guys into the game this early in the season. He didn't want anyone throwing 3 games in 4 days. Now you can say, well, look, Trevor May only pitched once. If I'm not mistaken, that was opening day. So he's a fresh arm. You would have thought you could have gone to Adam Ottavino. Maybe Seth Lugo is unavailable. But what I think really happened here is I think Buck Showalter managed this game with the intent of setting things up for their big series against the Phillies. And he almost got away with it. And sometimes the best managers will have a game like this where they'll get criticized. And you know what? They go out and they sweep the Phillies. And in their mind, everything panned out the way they wanted. He wanted to keep the arms fresh. That's why he goes, all right, we're going to try to get away with Carlos Carrasco, Chasen Shreve, and Trevor Williams. If you think about it, Trevor Williams could have given the Mets 3 innings. So let's say Carrasco got knocked out after 4 and didn't look good. Well, they had the right guys there to do the mop-up duty. Unfortunately, Carrasco pitched great and the Mets didn't hit, and that puts you in this really bad spot where those guys were on the mound in high leverage situations down the stretch of the game. If this game was played in September and the Mets were really, needing every single win, he probably managed it differently. But it's the first game of the season. He wanted to get everyone involved, and because of that, I'm giving Buck Showalter a pass on this game. I really am. The only decision I don't give him a pass on is the Cano decision. And the thing that concerns me a little bit is because at times I think an old school manager may get a little bit swept away by the stature of a player like Robinson Cano. He watched Robinson Cano and his entire, Hall of Fame career play out in front of him before the steroids. So he knows what this guy is capable of. And so in that spot, he's probably thinking, do I want to go to the kid in JD Davis, in his mind, or to a guy in Robinson Cano who's been clutch and you just need a single? It's not like they needed a home run. They just wanted a base hit in that spot. But they can't rely too much on Cano. I don't want Cano getting 500 plate appearances for this team. My vision of Cano's season, when I've been advocating for him, is for him to be excellent in 350 plate appearances as opposed to being overused. And I'm a little bit concerned that things are trending in that direction. But these problems usually work themselves out as injuries are going to pop up, and then you're going to be happy you have that depth across the board. Now, in the next segment here, I want to talk about the pitching over the weekend with Chris Bassitt and Carlos Carrasco, because that is the most encouraging thing we saw. The Mets right now, even without Jacob deGrom, seem to have a really potent trio atop their starting rotation. Before we get to that, though, betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Master Championship odds, podcast, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so Carlos Carrasco took the hill today, went 5 2/3, allowed just 2 hits, no walks, 5 strikeouts. The 1 run he allowed was a solo home run off the bat of Nelson Cruz, a guy who has a lot of success in his career against Carrasco. You can't fault him for that. Guy's a great hitter, one of the greatest home run hitters in MLB history, and particularly over the last decade. So he goes yard. You'll take that 10 times out of 10 when it comes to the start from Carlos Carrasco. One of the things that they talked about a lot during this game is that Carrasco feels great this year because he had that off-season surgery to clean up his elbow, which apparently was bothering him for a very long time. And you can see that through his curveball usage. Now, suddenly, he is going back to that curveball. Early in his career, Carlos Carrasco didn't even have that slider. It was a pitch he developed, and it became his primary pitch, and it is his best pitch still. But now he has that vertical drop, the vertical movement of a curveball to pair with it that he's going to go to even more. So he has this 5-pitch arsenal that he showed us on Sunday where he threw 20 sliders, 17 changeups, 16 four-seam fastballs, 12 curveballs, and 7 sinkers. And all that is courtesy of Baseball Savant, where they track all of that pitch data. 72 pitches, 50 strikes, and he got whiffs on every single pitch but his sinker in this start. So just to show you the type of cerebral pitchers the Mets have, to go from Carrasco or from Bassitt to Carrasco back-to-back days, these are guys that can use multiple pitches, and when they are on, they're able to get a lot of weak contact. They're able to get some swings and misses, and these are just really good veteran pitchers. It's good to have a veteran starter that's been there, done that, that can go out and give you 6 strong innings. There's just something about a veteran that you like in some of these spots. And I think when you're projecting out a rotation, there's just less of a variable for bad performances when you have a veteran in these spots. And with Carrasco, I've been singing his praises since the Mets traded for him. You know, when they got Carlos Carrasco and Francisco Lindor a year ago, or over that now, I had said at the time that Carlos Carrasco for that team served a bigger need because the Mets at the time really needed to address their starting rotation, as you do every year. And Lindor was just this incredible luxury upgrade they just made, going from what was a pretty decent, not great, but a decent shortstop situation they had. Because if you remember, coming off 2020, Andres Jimenez had really impressed us to the point that we thought he would have a promising future as a start of this league. Now, after a down year 2021, that's not the case. But at the time, I don't think people were as down on him. And so I was like, Carlos Carrasco is the underrated huge win in this deal. Last year, as we've talked about, blows out his hammy. And to me, I just flushed that season, as I've been saying all off season. This is a guy that I just don't want to read into one year where he never was comfortable, never was right, and not look at the large sample size of his career as a quality starter. And what did we see in this outing? We saw someone that resembled the guy that was an anchor in that Indians rotation for years. So I really love what I saw from Carrasco. Now, getting to Chris Bassitt, he was, the best pitcher the Mets had in this series. I mean, no one looked better than Chris Bassitt did on Saturday night. 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. Had a bunch of them early. I think he probably had at least 5 in the first 3 innings, if not 6. And he showcased a 6-pitch arsenal. One of the things that Bassitt said after the game is he talked about how every year he likes to add a pitch. So he's just adding to his bag every single year to give him more weapons to attack hitters. And the off-speed stuff is just unbelievable, especially in this start. 20 swings on off-speed pitches in that start, 10 whiffs. So that's a 50% whiff percentage. 6 of his 8 strikeouts came on the off-speed stuff. The curveball, just sensational. So if Chris Bassitt keeps pitching like that, I mean, this Mets rotation is in absolutely great hands. And I also love Bassitt's comments after the game in regards to the team. He talked about Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor playing after getting chipped tooth, and this camaraderie in the locker room and the mission and the goal, and how this team is trying to do big things. And he also joked about how his family is happy he's on another team. And he kind of saved it from being just a complete bashing of the Athletics by saying, it was tough for those 10 p.m. starts for his family and friends to watch. But I also think that he is digging, this environment of pitching on the big stage in New York for a contender. And he also talked about, when asked about pitching to Juan Soto, that he didn't care who's in the box. He faced Shohei Ohtani and Guerrero last year. He's just going to attack hitters, and his best is going to beat them. That confidence in not only himself, but also the team. I was ready to run through a brick wall after watching that interview. So Chris Bassitt looked great. Carlos Carrasco looked great. And this rotation right now with Scherzer, Bassitt. How many people are going to do that? I've heard other people make that mistake, called Bassitt basket. But with Scherzer, Bassitt, and Carrasco, this is a rotation that could make it through the entire season without Jacob deGrom if they had to. The fact that you can add deGrom into this mix and hopefully you get to a playoff situation where it's those 4 veterans, that's why there is such high hopes that this team can make a deep run in October. But they're going to have to get through teams like the Phillies, who they'll be playing next. I will preview that series in just a minute. But before I do, I'm going to tell you about the best tasting protein bar ever, which of course is Built Bar. Built Bars come low in calories, low in sugar, low in fat, but they are high in protein and high in fiber, all coming covered in that 100% real chocolate. They also have the Built Bar Puffs, which are the first ever protein-infused marshmallows. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat that also comes covered in that 100% real chocolate with flavors like the cinnamon churro, the coconut marshmallow, and the banana cream pie. Also good. Built is coming out with new limited time flavors all the time. So make sure you check out their site often at built.com to see what's new. And when you're there, use our promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. So the New York Mets and Philadelphia Phillies have gotten off to very similar starts. The Phillies played the Oakland Athletics as their first series, another bottom dweller type team similar to the Nationals, and they took the first two games but dropped the series finale. Now, these two teams are going to go head to head for the first time. This is going to be a great rivalry this year. You add in players like Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber, who are great hitters, but also great characters. And it's just going to be a lot of fun to watch. That lineup is devastating in Philly. The more you look at it, it's hard to discredit their chances to contend because they play in a bandbox and they can put up 10 runs on any given night. So they're going to be tough. And the first game of this series will be Taijuan Walker versus Ranger Suarez. If there's a pitcher in the Mets rotation that I have not been high on throughout this offseason, unfortunately, that has been Taijuan Walker. And in his last outing in the spring, he came out after just the first inning. I think it was in the second inning when he came out that knee discomfort. Remember, he had surgery on the knee this offseason. So that is certainly something to monitor. David Peterson is in the Mets bullpen right now. So he is likely to piggyback on Walker in this start. Not sure how deep into the game Walker will even go. And you just hope that he can get through that lineup. A lot of tough lefties with Schwarber and Harper in there now. It's going to be a very difficult matchup for Walker to get through that game. And the Mets will be facing a really talented pitcher in Ranger Suarez, who had a 1.36 ERA last season. If you remember, Suarez started the year in the Phillies bullpen, ended the year in their starting rotation. He pitched 4 2/3 against the Mets last year, and he actually did allow just one run pitching in relief in a game the Mets ultimately won 4-3. They were down a run in the seventh inning, and Kevin Pillar hit a game-tying home run off of Suarez. Suarez will be limited to 60 pitches in this outing, so the Mets can get into that bullpen early. I'd imagine, knowing that, they'll be a little bit patient, try to work counts, get Suarez out of the game as quickly as possible. I also would imagine you will see the right-handed lineup, so J.D. Davis likely DHs, maybe Cano gets a day off. Starling Marte will obviously be back out there, so that will be good to see as well, and we'll see if the Mets can do some damage on Suarez and get this series off to a good start. Taijuan Walker last year made 5 starts against the Phillies and pitched to a 3.76 ERA. Game 2, huge edge in the pitching matchup for the Mets. Tyler McGill against some scrub named Zach Wheeler. Okay, maybe the Phillies had the slight edge with the guy that was the runner-up in the Cy Young last year, but if there was a time to face Zach Wheeler, it is now, in that we have no idea how ready he really is to make this start. He says he's ready, but we haven't seen him face a hitter since last season. Did not make any starts in spring, experienced some shoulder discomfort this offseason, so he came into spring behind. By the time he got ramped up, he also had the flu during spring training, and by the time he was able to enter a game, the one game he was going to pitch in got rained out. So he has not thrown a game yet. They have been very cautious with him. Now he is going to get inserted into this rotation with a pitch limit as well. Could be 60, could be 50. We really don't know. So again, the onus is on the Mets to be patient early on. You know, Zach Wheeler is going to try to pitch to contact. You can't just let him throw strikes by you, but you can foul some pitches off, get that pitch count up. You can get Wheeler out of the game early as well. The more you see this Phillies bullpen, I think the better in this series. And Tyler McGill, even though I was joking a bit saying the Mets had the edge, if he pitches the way he did on opening day, they'll have a great chance. He did not give up a run, of course, in those 5 strong innings with 6 strikeouts. The final game of this series will be Max Scherzer versus Aaron Nola. Nola gave up 4 runs in his first start of the season against Oakland, but went 6 innings and got the win. And we know Scherzer gave up 3 runs in his first start of the season against the Nationals. That's a great pitching matchup, of course. So with all that said, Mets versus Phillies, this is the first real measuring stick series. They had the day off on Thursday. I really do believe Buck Showalter, as I said in the first segment today, I do believe that he had this series in mind with the way he managed this game, giving Starling Marte the day off. Only going to Williams and Shreve out of the bullpen, keeping May and Ottavino and Lugo all fresh. I think that was maybe the reasoning behind some of these decisions. Now you have the real AA team that they're going to put out there in this series, trying to send a message to this Phillies team. And I think that this is a very important series to win. You don't have to go out and sweep the Phillies. They're a good team. They're going to probably get a game, but it would be a really nice early season feather in the Mets cap to be able to win the first two series of the season, in particular to win one against this Phillies team that you would imagine is going to be in the thick of this race for a large portion of the year. I don't think that they have a complete enough roster to really hang in there with the Mets and the Braves, but you cannot discount that lineup. And they're a team that is going to be beloved in Philly. I mean, you just see it early on. Schwarber opens the season with a leadoff homer, and the city's electric. It's a team that is going to be hard to beat in that ballpark in particular as well. I think when the series or the season series shifts over to Citi Field, the Mets will have a real edge because it's a bigger outfield. That means trouble for a Phillies defense that's going to have Castellanos or Schwarber out there every single game. So that will be helpful. The home crowd advantage flipping. But when you're playing in that bandbox, it's going to be very important to try to keep the ball on the ground against a team that's just going to be hitting a lot of home runs. So we'll see how the Mets are able to accomplish that this week. But anyway, that will be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan, but we call him Sully. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date on everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.